So actually, on our very first episode ever, I brought up a crazy buy one, get one free deal you could get with a car. You remember?
Yeah.
And I, up until that point, that was the craziest deal I'd ever heard for someone's purchase of a car, right? But I found a better one.
Oh, man.
And in 1965, there was an ad from a Pontiac dealership that was doing, they did this like ad campaign, and there was a play on words, and I think it was a play on words about how crazy the deal was, right? And they said, you can come and get this brand new Pontiac for $1,395 bananas. Like, it's bananas, right? And it's kind of a funny ad. I guess that's what maybe TV radio was like in the 60s. I don't know.
I've read a whole book about this, actually.
Are you serious?
Well, half a book. I didn't finish it. But yeah, there was a guy in the 70s in New York who went by the name Crazy Eddie, and he was an electronics dealer. And Crazy Eddie, he kind of stole some of his ideas from other salesmen at the time. And there was a stereotype of this kind of salesman who was insane. The idea would be that like he is so stupid that he will just give customers a really good deal, and his wife doesn't want him to do it because they're gonna not have food to eat, but he will not stop until he gives you a good deal. So the bananas thing actually falls a lot in line with a lot of the marketing trends at that time.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm glad to know that. But a little old lady by the name of Bernice took him up on his offer and went into the dealership and said, "Sir, how can I deposit my bananas for the car?" And he said, "Ma'am, it was an ad. It's a joke about the price being so crazy good. It's actually 1,395 bananas. It's supposed to mean dollars. These bananas means dollars." And Bernice didn't take kindly to this. In fact, she threatened to sue, and through a course of whatever followed, I don't know, through some course of events, Bernice convinced this car dealership to actually take her deposit of 1,395 bananas. So she went to the store and she bought 1,395 bananas and traded them in for a brand new Pontiac.
I'm imagining a scenario where she ate a lot of the bananas and just put 1,395 peels on the ground. That was her threat. You're not getting out of here without falling on the ground.
A buy one, get one free car deal. Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But I think, honestly, better deal is 1,395 bananas.
Welcome to the Factoid Podcast. You didn't ask for it, but we're going to tell you about it anyways. My name's Tun Gessel.
And I'm Topher Humphreys.
We thought it'd be fun to try out some new nicknames based on last week. And you can see how well it goes. We can't even say them with a straight face. Chris, I would consider myself to be an introvert. And when I travel, I don't mind visiting cities when I travel, but usually the goal is to get out into nature. And specifically, I like to get as far away from other people when I'm experiencing nature. And I'd say it's one of my toxic traits where if I am on a trail or if I'm on a scenic drive and there's a car right in front of me and we have to drive slow because it's like a hard place to drive, I will pull over so that I don't have that car in front of me the whole time. Or if I'm walking, like hiking on a trail, I will stop for 2 or 3 minutes so I just don't have to look at a person in front of me when I'm walking, and I can take in nature better. And I mean, I think most introverts can kind of see where I'm coming from, though. Like, if you hang out with other people too much, you need to retreat and recharge before you're okay with socializing again. And I mean, sometimes when I'm at the grocery store, I might put earbuds in and, listen to music when I'm getting the groceries. Like, these are not radical ideas to be worried about. I mean, it's definitely not a symptom of societal collapse predicted in a lab rat experiment 50 years ago, right? Let me tell you about Rat Utopia, Chris.
Oh, no.
John Calhoun was a scientist who studied behavioral systems and their effect on the brain. He was fixated on the concept that he called the second death. The first death, in his mind, was the death of the spirit, which was followed by the death of the body, or the second death. So he was trying to experiment with, if he removed the second death, would the first death still happen? And there's no better group of people to exemplify death than the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So Calhoun tried to construct his experiment around the idea of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So death by the sword was exemplified by immigration. He took a bunch of rats and he's putting them in this experiment. And in real life, when you leave your society, you are at a higher risk of death. Like, it doesn't sound that crazy, but like if you move to a new area, it's harder to live somewhere else after living
Sure.
in one spot. And just the stresses associated with it. So Calhoun wanted to take away that by trapping his rats in a large cage that he named Universe 25. And death by famine was removed in the experiment by having a steady amount of food and water easily available for the rats at all time. They never had to worry about not having enough resources. Death by disease was removed by Calhoun's personal janitorial services. He cleaned the pens, and he also just isolated them from interacting with other animals or plants that might cause disease. And the rats that were bred for the experiment, there is like a very rigorous process that goes into getting like perfect lab rats that aren't going to introduce problems.
Sure.
So there were no genetic issues that would happen over time that would cause problems in the experiment. And death by predation was removed simply by there being no predators around. So this experiment starts with 16 rats dropped into this large cage with everything that they could ever want in life. And things start out pretty great. They get acclimated to Universe 25, and the population takes off. And mice are very social animals, so they built about 14 different social groups inside of the cage, and they were based around the different food hoppers, which makes sense. And the most aggressive male in each group kind of became the leader of the 14 social groups, of each of the groups. And there were various statuses and roles that the mice over time kind of began to fill. And after a year, the 16 have turned into 800.
Wow.
So as the population grows and none of the rats are dying, basically like average life expectancy of these rats is about 800 days.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a little while. So as they're growing and none of them are dying, but they're reproducing, all of the roles in society have been filled. So new rats are born and they're raised well, but there's just no role in society for them to go into. And normally these excess rats would just leave. They would go find a new area to live and they would start a new society, but they can't. So the younger males fight the older males for their status. And it's kind of a toss-up of who wins, but the winners get to retain control or gain control of being the leaders of their different groups. But the losers have to form their own losers group in the cage. And the losers will then fight amongst each other, but they only do things together as losers, and they're not allowed to interact with the rest of the group. And the winners get so obsessed with keeping the losers out of everything that all of the female rats start to realize that like they don't have males to help take care of them and their kids. So the females start taking on the roles of the males. So they are having the babies, but defending their nests. And ultimately, they start being bad moms. They start kicking their young out way early before they're ready. So because they're so worried about defending their nests and protecting things, that they actually start like abandoning the baby mice, and they even start fighting them. And like sometimes they just kill them, and they aren't teaching them how to become adults in society. So after about a year and a half, another year has gone by here since we started. Universe 25. Population 2,000.
Wow.
How many is that compared to Cardington? Like, is that?
It's more, I think.
Wow.
More than live here.
One rat per person. If you elect me mayor of Cardington, I will give you each and every home will have 3 rats. But the bad part is now the population begins to decline.
Okay.
2,000 is around the most they ever get. So all of the babies in this time that are born, they were abandoned before they could learn affection and communication from their moms, and before they could learn aggression from their dads. So there are too many other mice to make friends. But like literally, it is a physical problem. They like one mouse is trying to communicate with the other mouse, and another mouse just like runs over top of them. Like they can't even just get the equivalent of words that they say out. So they also don't learn how to fight like from the dads. So they're all They're all really pretty. Calhoun actually nicknames these males the beautiful ones because all they do is they eat, drink, sleep, and groom themselves. They never get into fights. They have just a perfect coat, and they do not interact with another mouse in Universe 25. So you just have hundreds and hundreds of mice. They just pretend no one is there.
They're just loners.
Yeah.
Even though they're physically directly next to.
Yeah. Like maybe even like walking over top of other mice, but just not acknowledging their existence. No attempt at courtship or mating as well. And like as all the competent males and females begin to die around this time of old age, all that's left are females that didn't learn how to reproduce and communicate, males that don't know how to be aggressive and communicate, and they stop having babies. The numbers just start to dwindle. The males all just hang out alone and groom themselves. And they would even take some of these mice out into other universes. There's a multitude of universes in this lab rat hole thing. I'm not an expert in lab rats, but they're doing other experiments nearby.
Sure.
So they'll take like 5 rats and stick them in a normal, like a control group, and to see if maybe being around normal rat societies will fix them. It doesn't. They are stuck this way the rest of their life. Yeah. So by the time this study gets published, after about like a few years, total population of rat Utopia, it was up to 2,000. It's down to 27.
No way.
And I could not find any official answer of like how it turned out, but from what I can tell, I think it went to 0.
Yeah. That's insane.
I know. It's a really dark episode.
It's very dark.
Yeah. So this sends society into a panic in the 1970s. This is like 70 to 72, I think, was when the study was done. And I think you can see why. At this time, like society and technology are rapidly progressing, and cities like Hong Kong are starting to become overcrowded. We talked about it the last episode, but like haven't had a war in a while that went and killed everybody. So there's like across the world, populations are booming at this point. A Soylent Green comes out. People are starting to think about overpopulation and some of the ramifications of it. You have countercultures like, say, hippies, where they're a group who is known for not being aggressive. I will say they are not known for cleaning themselves, though.
That's true.
Like, it's not a one-to-one, but people at the time are thinking like, oh no, are these the beautiful ones? Are the hippies our beautiful ones of our generation? And then they read this study and they think like, society is going to collapse. We are ruined. And I found this out this morning. There's an animated movie that I've heard of that is based off of Rat Utopia. Have you heard of The Secret of Nim?
I don't think so.
It was like an 80s animated kids show.
Okay.
But like the plot is basically the plot of what I just told you. But a little bit friendlier.
Sure. Slightly less dark.
Right. And NIM, like from the title, it actually stands for the National Institute of Mental Health, which is the people that funded this study. The movie was not made by them. That would be a very bad marketing scheme.
It would.
But I want to say, like, yeah, before anybody finishes listening to this podcast and is worried about the fate of society, Calhoun wasn't trying to create panic, and a lot of scientists do understand that maybe don't take it literally. There are some things we can learn from it, but like, don't freak out. And one of the biggest things in a lot of scientists' opinions is that we can move. We are not trapped in a cage. There are plenty of other cities we can go to. Like, we are not stuck in the places that we're at. But I watched a few of Calhoun's interviews earlier today, and he gave them to different journalists over the years as he was doing the experiment. And I actually feel like he gave some very good advice on when people said, like, how can we act to help stop this? So he said that just like rats, too high of a contact rate can disconnect us from society. Sounds a lot like social media, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, think about the amount of people that we interact with or even are aware of in a day compared to 100 years ago.
Yeah, it's insane.
So his solution was that we establish higher quality relationships that are more meaningful. And if we see our friends who are struggling to find places in society and trying to find their role, help them fulfill your role. And if we can start doing these things, maybe we won't meet the same fate as the rats in Universe 25.
So Payton, do you collect anything?
Yeah, I definitely do. I try to keep my collections under control.
Sure.
Yeah, so I definitely collect old video games,
Okay.
usually like Game Boy games, and I've tried to put a bit of a quota on it where
Sure.
I'm only buying ones that I care about a lot or there's something unique to it. I also collect film cameras. Once again, have a bit of a quota. One of my rules that I try to enforce is that if I'm buying a film camera, that I have to shoot at least one roll on it in
Sure.
order for it to deserve to be allowed to stay.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's good. And I feel like it's good that you know that about yourself, because I have a few. I guess I have a few collection, or one specific collection, but like once you get into collecting something, almost the act of collecting becomes just as fun as what you're collecting. I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's like anytime you see anything that falls into the category anywhere, you're like, I have to buy that. Like, I need that. And it can easily get out of hand, for sure. I collect Rubik's Cubes, for anyone who's wondering. But there is another collection that I began not too long ago. And I was inspired actually by a TikTok. And I might have told you this story before, but I'll tell you again, because I want to tell all of you guys about it as well. There is a TikTok, and I don't know who it was from or anything like that, but it was a guy who said, let me show you my click collection. And he flipped his camera around and he panned and he showed a DVD rack. You know, like those DVD racks that are like, you know, like the width of a DVD case, and then they just stack and there's like a wire rack.
Yeah.
He panned around and showed an entire DVD tower filled with duplicate copies of Clicks starring Adam Sandler. And it was like, it had to be like at least 50. Like, it was a ton.
Yeah, there's a video game one that I heard about recently. Do you know about the whole Burger King video game that came out on the Xbox 360?
It's ringing a bell, but no.
There were a few games, but the one that people like the most is called Sneak King.
Okay.
And you play as the king and you have to sneak up behind people. It's a stealth game.
Okay.
And you serve them a burger instead of killing them.
Interesting.
There was a guy I read about who I think has collected like maybe 10,000 copies
No
of this.
way. So again, collecting can get out of hand. But when I saw that video, I thought, how ridiculous is that? I've got to do something like that. And so an idea was born in me. And but I don't care about the movie Click. I don't really care about movies that much. In fact, I just digitally stream. In fact, I digitally stream most everything, and I read ebooks. But there's one specific book that I have a very particular liking to. My favorite book of all time. It's Ready Player One. For those of you out there who haven't read the book, I recommend it. It's a wonderful book. If you want to listen to the audiobook, it's one of my favorite audiobooks, one of the best narrators in the biz. But I decided at that point when I saw that video, I thought, like, it immediately clicked. I'm going to start collecting copies of Ready Player One. And I started out with a little bit of boundaries, right? I decided, well, instead of just buying random copies, I'm going to limit myself to used copies that I randomly run across at like a thrift store or something, because it's a popular enough book that it's going to be around at places like that. So that can't be that many, right? But I also decided, well, since I want to get myself started here a little bit, I'll get a couple copies that are cool. So I started looking them up, and I realized it's a popular enough book that it's been translated into like a bunch of different languages.
Right.
So a bunch of languages means usually multiple publications in each country, usually multiple publications in each language. So I decided I'm going to buy a couple foreign language copies. And so I kind of started my journey there to where I'm not going to be buying duplicates. I'm just buying different languages or whatever.
I think I found your shelf at one point, maybe a year or two ago, and I'm pretty sure I read an excerpt out of the German version.
That's right. Yeah. So I've got German, I've got a Spanish and French, and I think I have. There's some languages I can't even recall to you right now that I have, and then I try to get different variants of each language. Like, I get as many as possible. Basically, I want different covers, and they all have different covers. Some of them are super cool, some of them are just boring. And then I've also gotten a bunch of just English copies, and I haven't gotten into hardcovers yet. I've just got these are all soft cover. But anyway, so I've started collecting this, and it's all been inspired by that TikTok. And I say all that to say, like, the older I get, I say this as I'm talking about collecting a young adult science fiction book, right? But like, the older I get, like, the more my interests are curbed to just things that are like very specific. And specific to me. Like, I think a lot of people's interests are like, you're just interested in the things that you see, and usually the things you see are the things everyone sees. You know what I'm saying? So like, a lot of people have the same interests. I like find a lot of joy in like liking something that I like for no other reason than I just really like it. And so the older I get, the more like that I get. So like, I feel like like I don't have any tattoos. I'm like a little too scared to get a tattoo, I
Same.
think. But like I really like the idea of getting like something meaningful, like art on your body.
Oh, so you mean our logo? We should both get our logo.
I mean, that could be a fun behind the scenes video. I don't know.
Yes.
But no, see, like, I just really like that idea. I think there's room for meaningful things in your life. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's cool. And so I actually found out about a project, a visual art project that really piqued my interest. And I tell all that just now to tell you that, like, I don't know why it piqued my interest, but it's one of those things that for some reason I thought was pretty super interesting. So there's a man named David Shrigley who's a visual artist, and he had this idea, okay, and this is where it came from. He lives in the UK, and in 2017 there was a thrift shop in Swansea in the UK that came up with, they put out a display at their store, and it had a bunch of copies of the DaVinci Code, and on top of it, it said, "Please stop donating copies of the DaVinci Code. We get an average of one every day, and we can't get rid of them." And immediately what came to my mind was, I wish Ready Player One was in abundance like that,
Yes.
right? And in fact, I have and this goes out to all you guys who listen. I have everyone basically who knows me. I say, if you're at a thrift store and you see Ready Player One, you buy it and I'll pay you back for it. Okay,
Ooh,
so
that's
this goes
good to
for
know.
you too.
Yeah.
So anyone out there, you find it, you let me know. I will buy it from you for the same price you bought it. I'm not paying extra. But I like. Because again, I don't run across them every day.
Sure.
I've probably seen it 3 or 4 times, and so I buy it when I see it. But so this guy sees this display and thinks, how odd, there's a crazy amount of these. And it is a really super popular book, but it's not very meaningful. And he didn't find it very meaningful, but he did, just like me, become inspired to purchase every possible copy he could find of the DaVinci Code. Except David Shrigley made it farther than I've made it. He, in fact, gathered more than 6,000 copies of the DaVinci Code.
Oh, man.
And he had an idea of what to do with this. And I think when he started, he didn't really know what it was going to be. But as he continued on, he had this idea birth. And he states that when he was in college, he read the book 1984 by George Orwell. Mm-hmm. And he said it kind of stuck out to him then, and it felt relevant and it felt important then to him, but he hadn't read it for a long time. And at this point in his life now, just within the past few years, he read it again and just couldn't believe how relevant this book still was, right? And he really liked it, and he considers it like, hey, he like recommends that you read this book. I've read the book in high school. I don't really remember it, so I'm not recommending you read that book. I don't know. But he thought that book was very important and very like worth spending your time reading. And another thing happened that made it even more possible is that this book, it's been out for 70 years now. It's been published for 70 years, which means it's not copywritten anymore.
It's public
basically.
domain?
Yeah, basically, it's public domain, right? So he came up with this idea. David, did what's called pulping to all 6,000 of his copies of the DaVinci Code. He pulped them, which means he like basically mushed them into paper, like into shreds that they make paper out of.
Yeah.
And so he pulped all 6,000 copies of the DaVinci Code, and with that paper, he created a brand new, like, artistic, it's basically the book, but like with his own, like he has a team and they designed a cover, and he reprinted 1984 by George Orwell on the recycled pulped paper of the DaVinci Code. And it's kind of cool. Like you can apparently see like some of the faint like letterings of like the old stuff.
That's fun. Which
is pretty cool. So it's like a cool visual thing, but it's also like this thing where it was an important enough book. He thought, I want to remake it. It means a lot to me. I'm going to make it in my own way. I'm going to sign it. I'm going to number it. And then I'm going to make it out of like this other thing. And he talks kind of about how it's not like he doesn't care. Like he has no thoughts, positive or negative, about the DaVinci Code. It's not like he chose that for a reason,
right,
other than absolute abundance in thrift stores, yeah, right? And so it's not like it says there's no commentary on the DaVinci Code in this. It's more just like, this is what I had and this is what I'm doing with it. And I just thought it was one of those things where like I don't know why it's interesting to me, but like I would collect that book if I could. That brings me to my next point. I looked into the book, right? There are 1,250 copies. He made 1,250 copies out of it. They're more expensive than thrift store copies of Ready Player One, sadly.
Sure.
He actually did like a little pop-up shop, and they sold the first 250 for the low price of like 495 pounds.
Ooh,
so like,
yeah,
you know, it's a little steep for me. And they're like, now they're coming out in batches all the way up to 1,250, and every batch is like another 250, and they cost even more, right?
Of course.
But all that to say, the older I get, the more interested I am in things that I don't know if it's just like authentically interesting for some reason, or like I recommended the book Ready Player One to one of my friends not long ago at all. We were talking about reading, and most of the time when you recommend a book to people, like they don't read it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Which is, I'm not offended by that because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But he told me, he's like, I could tell when you recommended that book to me that it like that meant something to you. So he's like, he read it and
Wow.
he told me about what he thought about it. So when someone has something that like is important to them, I feel like it draws me into it.
Yeah.
And so just reading this story about this guy's passion for 1984 and his passion for visual art, like it drew me in immediately for some reason to this project.
So my question for you, Chris, is once you have gained enough copies of Ready Player One, what book are you going to make?
Obviously, well, here's the problem. No, you know what? I think it's still cool. I would just make a cool Ready Player One.
Thank you for listening to the Factoid Podcast. If you have a factoid and want to share it with us, just send us an email at factoidpodcast.com. Also wanted to say that really excited for Christmas coming up here, and we're going to have a special little Christmas episode for you guys.
As always, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts or on our website, factoidpodcast.com.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.